The Gilded Age is heavily inspired by the richest families from New York, especially the Vanderbilts and the Astors. And while the drama on the show keeps viewers on the edge of their seats, the real story regarding the original families is almost better than any TV show. The Astor family were the kings and queens of New York during the Gilded Age, as they were practically at the top of even the highest members of New York society. Even to this day, they're still known as one of the most influential families in history who, along with the Vanderbilts, shaped New York into what it is today. John Jacob Astor, head of the Astor family and the founder of their success, was considered America's first multimillionaire. The family's history is beyond fascinating, as it takes us from simple Germany all the way to the sinking of the Titanic. The original John Astor used to be a dairy salesman in Germany before he immigrated to New York in the 1780s, where he slowly started building his wealth through the fur trade. With his ruthless business, John managed to accommodate around $8.9 million in today's money by the start of the 19th century. He then quickly entered the real estate market, and the first move was buying as much property as possible all over New York. Even after John's passing, his son, William, continued to buy real estate as the family saw their biggest riches coming from that market. Many iconic places in New York used to be owned by the Astors, like the Astor Library, where the public theater can be found. The family was doing a truly impressive job when it came to philanthropy, which is why their fate today is so tragic. When it came to the Astor legacy, money was the most important thing, which John allegedly expressed even in his final moments as he passed in 1848 with only one regret: not buying more real estate. He supposedly said the famous quote, "Had I to do it over again, I would have put every nickel I had in New York estate." After John's passing, it was his son William who took over the family fortune. He also married Caroline Schermerhorn Astor, who became one of the biggest and most famous New York socialites. While William went on to become a hugely successful philanthropist just like his father, Caroline ruled the social scene of New York. She decided who was worth being a part of the elite and who wasn't, and she was even known to shun people who didn't fit her standard. Caroline was also known for establishing something called the 400, which is a list of people she deemed to be the highest in society. These socialites were then invited to her infamous balls and parties, something which even the Vanderbilts, who were secretly struggling at the time, were desperate to attend. The Astors had established themselves as an empire amongst New York's wealthiest, and it's even believed that they were the very first to create a family trust in American history. The Astors were ultimately nicknamed the Landlords of New York, or even the Slumlords of New York. However, things started to head south for the family by the time 1919 came around. In 1912, John Jacob Astor IV headed aboard the famous Titanic alongside his pregnant wife Madeline Talmadge Force, and only one of them made it out alive. According to reports, John was amongst the first to figure out that something was wrong that night, and he woke up his wife to immediately put her on a lifeboat. First thing he did was to make sure that she had all of her jewelry, and then he tried to save her. According to her, she urged him to stay with her. However, he refused, telling her, "The sea is calm, you'll be all right, I'll see you in the morning." Tragically, John never saw his wife again, as he drowned the very next morning on April 15th. With his passing, things started majorly changing within the Astor family. John's son, Vincent Astor, had inherited his dad's riches, becoming the richest man in America at the time, and that's when he realized exactly what his family had been doing. When confronted with the fact that his family were slumlords, he wasn't happy and quickly started turning things around. By 1919, he not only sold off a lot of the family's assets, but he also started a foundation intended to better mankind. This is also around the time that the family's trust was dissolved, which led to the wealth being spread around in the family. When Vincent passed in 1958, it was his wife Brooke who took over as the family head, and she continued to do her best to save the Astor name by giving up as much of their riches as possible. According to sources, she focused on giving as much as possible back to the city and would often even show up to housing projects and homeless shelters to see where her money was going. However, things got complicated when she decided that her son from a previous marriage would not inherit the foundation before her passing in 2019. Her son Tony was then accused of actually stealing Brooke's money and even doing things in the family name without her knowledge. Tony was eventually convicted for it, and it was his wife, Charlene Marshall, who ended up inheriting the rest of Brooke's $14.5 million fortune, thus ending the Astor legacy. While the family is still greatly respected even today, their incredible influence came to an end a long time ago, and all that remains is simple scraps of the great empire it used to be. Although the Astors might be considered the single greatest American dynasty, the Vanderbilts weren't far behind. HBO's The Gilded Age even gave us a glimpse into the family through Bertha Russell, who is based on Alva Vanderbilt, wife of William Kissam Vanderbilt. It was especially the rivalry between Caroline Astor and Alva that was shown on the show, as the Vanderbilts at one point struggled to enter Caroline's high society. The Vanderbilts once upon a time have been described as royalty amongst the New York elites, as the new money family impressed all of society by their fast rise to power. The Vanderbilts' money and societal status was what made them one of the most iconic families in American history, right there alongside the Astors, but it's also what made their downfall all the more fascinating. It all started when Cornelius Commodore Vanderbilt borrowed $100 from his mother to pilot a passenger boat around Staten Island in 1810. This move is what eventually turned his business into steamboats and ultimately expanded onto the railroad empire known as New York Central. Because of New York Central, Cornelius had a monopoly of all rail services in and out of New York, and the Vanderbilt empire quickly became a countrywide business. This hugely ambitious project was not only successful, but it crowned Cornelius as one of the richest men in the country, his fortune reaching $100 million by the time he passed in 1877. This was actually more money than the entire U.S. Treasury had at the time. Things went incredibly well for the family even after his passing as Cornelius's son. Billy managed to double the family fortune after he inherited the family's stake in New York Central. Something that Cornelius was very set on when he started earning his fortune was that the bulk of it should always be given to only one descendant to keep track of the fortune. However, when Billy passed in 1885, things slowly started to spiral for the family as he split the family's stake in their company between two of his sons, Cornelius Vanderbilt II and William Kissam Vanderbilt. With this move, the family's interest in New York Central started to lower while their spending started to rise. It was Cornelius II who initially managed the railroads until his passing in 1899. However, when William took over for his brother, it didn't take long before he retired to concentrate on his yachts and horses. The decline in interest when it came to business can now be regarded as a clear sign of the family's fate, especially since William was allegedly quoted saying, "Inherited wealth is a real handicap to happiness. It has left me with nothing to hope for, with nothing definite to seek or strive for." However, William did make a move for the family to get into philanthropy, as he decided to build million-dollar houses in New York, as well as to give hundreds of thousands of dollars to Columbia University, the YMCA, the Vanderbilt Clinic, and Vanderbilt University. But all of these moves also meant that the family wasn't earning any money, and the fortune stopped growing altogether. It's believed that William's decisions left the family with around the same amount of money that he had initially inherited when his father passed away in 1885. By the time the family empire reached its fourth generation, things started to look dark as the family struggled to keep up appearances among their peers. As the family's inheritance continued to get split between more and more family descendants, things started changing within New York Central, which would eventually be the end of the Vanderbilt empire. By the time World War II ended, public transportation in America started evolving beyond the railway system, marking the beginning of the end of New York Central. From 1946 to 1958, the railway system had to shut down 4 of its 6 routes between New York and Chicago, and the Vanderbilts were forced to slowly start selling their shares in the company. As other companies started becoming bigger shareholders, the Vanderbilts were eventually forced to let go of management. By 1970, the company declared bankruptcy, thus officially ending the Vanderbilt legacy. Today, just like the Astors, the Vanderbilt family is only a shadow of its past glory, as they seem to have evaporated into nothing. 6th generation Vanderbilt Anderson Cooper even revealed that there is absolutely nothing left of its great legacy. This is also made very clear by the family's past properties being torn down or reconstructed by other parties, leaving almost no trace of the Vanderbilts in New York. What do you think of the tragic decline of these two once great families? Let us know down below, and thanks for watching.